Quicktrick's new string four-wheel alignment kit here. I did go with extended attachment pin option. That I've run into that where trying to get enough wheel angle to make a good caster measurement in the front, it ends up hitting my fender. So those should really help with that. I can roll the wheel over a bit more and get a more accurate measurement up there. I was always able to compensate for it before, so I'm just looking to increase the accuracy a little bit that way. This is my first time going to have the four-wheel alignment, which will be good because having just converted over to the 3-link rear suspension in the rear, I'm curious where it ends up about how straightforward that the rear axle is facing, because that will move around with the rear steer that's built into the car based upon the ride height changes when it goes into a corner. It'd be nice to be able to check that as well as against the front and do a fresh alignment setup for the front. This is the last thing that I have left in order to have the car race ready for this year, is get a proper alignment put on it. So I'll go through getting this kit set up, put on the car. I'll probably have to have somebody come out here and help me and sit in the passenger or sit in the driver's side to simulate my weight in the seat, because I'll have to do a little bit of ride height adjustment still to factor that in. Right now I've got the ride height just initially set up where it's pretty even all the way around the car. The nose is a little bit lower than the rear, just to put a little bit of rake in the car. However, I'll open the door and step in and you can see just how much the ride height is going to change based upon my weight. That might be a ½ an inch or so. It's hard to say because I can't really measure it, but obviously that's going to affect not only the ride height in the front on the driver's side, but also the rear. I can visually see that both move down, which means that it's probably increasing the ride height on the passenger side. So we're going to want to adjust the coilovers to try to get an even leveled out ride height with the driver weight in the vehicle. All right, I have my driver weight in the car now. Just kind of grabbed some stuff that was heavy, you know, liquid, full argon cylinder, an old 2GZ turbo manifold, bunch of random steel, a battery, my nut and bolt bins, pretty much anything that could add up to about my weight. What I did was I took a tape measure and just hung it off of the went off of like the body stripe on the other side, measured it to the ground, and then I had the door open, just stepped into the car to put my weight on it, saw the change in the distance, and then I went and looked for that same distance up at the front fender. So not going to be perfect, but it is in the ballpark. I mean, it's better than not having any weight in there, because anytime the car is going to be getting raced, I'm going to be in it. I want an accurate ride height to try to even out the contact patches on all 4 tires. Now going around the car, the driver side front is now nearly a ½ inch lower than the passenger side front, and the passenger side rear is over ½ an inch higher than the driver's side rear. So I'll be able to level this out with the coilover setup. I know right now I have a little bit of an unexplained stagger in the rear as far as where those ride heights are ending up. This might help that. I really don't. I'll have to take a look under there. I forget what I was looking at last week for that. The front should be easy. Like, for example, if I can raise the driver's side front, that should lower the passenger side rear as well. Or vice versa, I can lower the passenger side front, and that will raise the driver's side rear a bit, just because of the way it shifts the weight around, but let's see what works out here. I mean, I don't have a set ride height where I have to be. I'm just gonna kind of go with what looks good. So I decided to level up my ride height. I raised the ride height on the driver's front because that was the lowest one. The highest one was the passenger rear, and the passenger front, driver's rear were sitting right at 25 and an eighth or a 16th, right to the bottom of the fender lip. So I just raised up the driver's side, shooting for that as well. So bringing that up should help bring the other opposite corner down. Now that I've just set it down off the jack stand, we're gonna roll the car back and forth a little bit, try to let it settle out, compress the suspension some, and just try to make sure we don't have any binding going on in the chassis. Just to try to get as static of a ride height as possible. I should also note the sway bar is disconnected for this. I don't have one in the rear, so it's just the front that I have disconnected. And now I can go around and check the ride heights again. Wherever my tape measure ended up. There it is. $25. 24 3/4. So I didn't come up quite as much as I was hoping. 25. 25 5/16. So got another 1/4 inch I can bring up the driver front, and we'll see where the passenger rear ends up. It'll be the same process. Alright, we've got the ride heights set. They're coming out as 25 and a 16th, 25, 25, and 25 and 3/16 on the passenger rear quarter. That's about as close as I'm going to get. The rear's been staying fairly staggered back there for whatever reason. I have the coilover adjusted up on the driver's side, but compared to the passenger side, and it's still just kind of coming out that way. I don't know if that has something to do with the way the 3-link is statically loading the coilovers or what's going on there. So, but that's an entirely new learning experience. I am far more concerned with making sure that the front works, and I can worry about tuning and setting up the rear later after I get on the track and I'm able to do so. As I said, the sway bar is disconnected in the front because I don't want it influencing side-to-side ride height. Also, if you're going to be doing this, make sure that if you have adjustable shocks, they're turned all the way down. When I started doing this, I realized that forgot that this one was still turned up a little bit. The rest I had turned down, but I still had a notch of rebound in 2 of them. So it was good. I just remembered to go through that. Turn everything down. That way the shock bound and rebound aren't holding up the ride height movements whatsoever. Now that I'm leveled out, I'll get the Quicktrick set up and we'll go through that. Now to set up the bars, we're going to have 3 of the attachment pins. As I said before, I will be using these extended ones. Now the actual pin section, all of them are the same. The difference here comes into when the pin goes into the lower crossbar. It is supported by the thickness of the bar here. To make up that difference, to make sure that they're level, when you put the upright bar on, you will leave this washer on. So, if we just set up one here, nice and simple, it's going to get put together like this. Now to line it up on the wheel, these will end up needing to get adjusted so that they clamp the outer lip of the wheel. If you need to go off an inner area, they have these caps that can be pushed over that to protect the inside lip of the wheel. I haven't had a problem with going around the outside, so it's just going to end up where these flaps are facing the wheel barrel and kind of encapsulate it. Now by the looks of it, I'll be able to get away without having to use the extended pins on this kit, because this part was a little bit taller and it hit the fender on my old Quicktrick setup. So with this being a little bit shorter, I can actually, it'll swing underneath the fender and I don't have to worry about that. So that's nice. So I just need to loosen up the set screws that are holding the rulers. And then I can swing them out to 90 degrees and snug them back up. See, we have notches for the string on this ruler, so I should use this one either on the driver's rear the passenger's rear or the driver's front, as the other one doesn't have the marks or the notches to hold the string. So we'll just slide this to the back of the car. Now if you care about your wheels, you're going to want to put a little bit of tape on the attachment pins just to protect the lip. I don't care. My wheels have already been tracked for a year. They've been covered in brake dust. It's pitted, they're faded a little bit, it's chipping. I'm not worried about it. But if you're worried about yours, then you need to go about that. And we'll just I'm gonna lift up a little bit by pressing the pin down with my thumb, and then I can snug it up. I gotta swing these rulers the other way. And I'm just squaring it up with the end of the cut and the tube. Alright, now it's hanging on there. Should be good. But these kits do come with an extra bungee just to help hold them on. If we can find somewhere to hook it, maybe I gotta stick it through the wheel here first, and then just like that. That'll help keep it from popping off of there at all. If you got a different wheel where, like mine, where this might not fit and you need to have something with a bigger hook on it, I've used regular old bungee cords before and gone and then like did a wrap around and then hooked it again. Now with our gauge fired up, we're going to want to check this lower part for level, make sure your floor is clean, and I can zero it. It'll have a little beep when it says that it's zeroed out, and then I can set it on here, and I'm just going to twist it around the rim till I can get it to 0. Right now it's showing 0.1, and that little bit of back and forth I moved it to it's switching directions. So I'm right there. Then we also need to check our vertical. So we're going to want this to 90 degrees. And same thing, we'll just move it a little bit until we can get it to 90. So I've got the string set up. I need to factor in what the stagger is on the car. I know there's going to be some because I widened the rear end. So I took my tape measure and I'm just measuring from the outside of the bar to the outside of the bar on the opposite side. It suggests doing it from the inner side of the wheel. However, up here I have headers in the way, and in the back I have mufflers in the way. So I'm doing it on the outside of the wheel. I'm trying to pull the tape measure in tight to the tire on both sides. I have the wheel straightened up to where the strings are showing as straight as possible on both sides to get centered up with whatever it is right now. I got 75 and 3/8 on the back for a measurement. Going across the front, I have 74 and 7/8. So that's a 1/2 inch difference front to back, with the front being narrower. So to make up that difference, I will loosen the string in the back, move it in 1/4 inch on both sides, tape it down, and then now we'll have our strings square to the chassis. So we're at 3, we're going to want to go in 1/4 inch, so we'll go to 2 3/4. Just going to take the tape, move it into 2 3/4, pull it tight, and I'll wrap the tape around it just to hold it. And I'll do the same to the other side. Now already I can make some interesting notes about where the alignment is at. As you can see there, we're in the number 3 notch, but over there we are, what is that? Looks like an 1/8 inch past 3. Yep, 1/8 inch past 3. So because we know our strings now square to the chassis, an 1/8 inch here is showing that the tire back is in, because we're out at 3 1/8. So we are currently at an 1/8 inch toe out for this wheel at the 34 inch spacing that is this lower bar. Obviously, the far longer this bar is, the more accurate you can be, because it's out past the wheel. So really, with our wheel being narrower than that 34 inch, we could say our effective toe out is slightly less than an 1/8 inch. But for the sake of keeping things simple, we're just going to say that's an 1/8 inch out. This side, on the other hand, same thing, we're at 3. And at the back, I am at, looks like exactly 3 1/8, the same. I'm not surprised that this is this close to start off, because I haven't changed anything with the front, other than the ride height might be slightly different than when I set it up last year. Now, if I was stringing the car and had jack stands, I would have needed a second person just to be able to do this job. And I would have been measuring off of the wheel. So the 34 out here that we're using to increase our accuracy versus what I would be doing off this 18 inch wheel is about half. So I would only be seeing a 1/16 of toe out on each wheel, versus this is showing me an 1/8. And both of those are a decent window, but added together, based upon our 34 inch measurement, we're looking at 1/4 inch of toe out. However, if I was doing it with a conventional string setup and being forced to go off of the wheel, we're actually only looking at an 1/8 inch toe out total. I'm perfectly okay with where this is at, but toe is usually not the first thing we want to check. We want to check caster, and then camber, and then toe. But I'm bringing this up first because we have some very interesting things going on in the back. We know we move this in 1/4 inch, so we're at 2 3/4. So 2 3/4 at the front would be straight with 0 toe. However, with this new rear end, you can see it is nowhere near that. In fact, we are down to 2 5/16. So that's almost 1/2 inch. What it is, it's 7. Wait, yeah. Hang on, let me do my math. So we're 3/4, so we're 1/4 inch and 3/16. Yeah, so we're 7/16 of toe in, and this is the same on both sides for this rear end. One might think that that amount of toe in is aggressive, and in a way, yes, it is. However, this is a new rear end for me. I don't know if that toe in came from just the way the rear axle was manufactured. It is a Ford 9-inch straight axle. It could be from the welding of my brackets. I did put on a first set of brackets, which I then had to cut off because I wanted to redesign the lowers because I was running into some clearance issues in a few places. So I'd actually welded on there twice and plasma cut stuff off once. But I'm much happier with the way the geometry is now working out in the rear. It fixed several problems. Maybe that heat welding, like it pulled it and stretched it a little bit out there by the snout that holds the floater assembly, or the floater hub. On the other hand, that 7/16, actually doing the math and moving that into a degree measurement is around 0.7 to 0.8. Actually, I can show you the math on that. So with our 7/16, that's 0.4375 is 7/16. Now we're going to divide that by the 34-inch gap that we're measuring across that lower beam. So we're getting a measurement of 12.86 thousandths per inch. Well, 1 degree is 17.4. So if I divide this again by 0.0174, what we're actually coming up with is we have 0.739 of a degree per inch. So what does that? We might as well round that up. We're going to call it, we have 3/4 of a degree of toe out on the rear on both sides, and really that's not all that much, even though it looks aggressive on the rulers. And if you're paying attention to the math, then our 1/8 inch of toe out in the front actually computes down to almost 1/3 of that, where we're less than 1/4 of a degree of toe out on both sides of the car, and coming up with a grand total of less than about 1/2 degree of toe out. So the front is actually pretty darn straight. I'm fine with it where it's at. Like I said, we need to check caster and camber first to verify everything. On this car, with the way I've set it up, caster should be pretty close. Honestly, if it's within a degree or two side to side, I'm kind of okay with that for what it is. Otherwise, if I want to be more accurate than that, I have ways to adjust it. Mostly I'm worried about where my camber is set up, because that's going to be one of the bigger effects about how flat the tire is staying in the corners. But we'll go through checking both. Alright, I've got the gauge mounted on here. It just goes through there, and I'm just pushing this, and this is pivoting until it is tight and squared up to the vertical. Now I'll unhook my strings just to make sure that we're not pulling on these while I turn the wheel. If you have grease plates or turn plates, they will help with the situation. I've used some turn plates that had a locating pin to let them rotate real nice around the center. They don't work so well, especially on these G-body cars, because the scrub radius is horrid. It's almost, with these wider wheels, it's almost a 3-inch scrub radius on this car. Really, if it was going to get designed around fixing that and making it nice, we need to have a high offset wheel and put a lot longer control arms on. That's a possibility for mod I'm going to do this year, but I'd have to buy a different set of wheels to run on the front and yada yada yada. We'll see whether or not I get around to it. But we're going to want to check caster by turning our gauge on, and we're going to make sure it's in degree mode, and we're going to turn the wheel to 20 degrees. If you got a turn plate that indicates that, great. Otherwise, how I have been going about it is I'll use my piece of tape reference for the top of the steering wheel, And I'm just going to turn the wheel about as far as I might turn it on the racetrack, and a little bit further. So typically that's about a 3/4 turn. So I'm going to get my 3/4 turn in, and now I will zero this gauge out. Where this is nice is this used to hit, and even now I wouldn't be able to turn the wheel this far and check caster because it hit the fender with the old setup. That's what those extended pins are for. I think this upright is just a little bit shorter than the kit I had previously. Now with that zeroed out, we'll turn the wheel the other way. Now we have a measurement of 4.1. So we can take that 4.1, multiply by 1.5, and that should give us a pretty accurate caster measurement. So 4.1 times 1.5, I have around 6.15 degrees of caster. Now I can repeat that process on the other side and compare the two, and if I want to make an adjustment, it'll come down to shimming or offsetting the upper control arm to make that work. It varies by car, so I'm not going to go over that with you, but that's just how you do that calculation. Now, to check the camber, after you've modified and set your caster, and the thing is, depending on your car, like a stock G body, we'd end up having to go back and forth a whole bunch with shims to balance out the camber and caster. So you'd be checking the caster first and then the camber. For the sake of showing this where you can see with the camera, I'll be setting 0 on the gauge and then putting it back onto the bracket, and that will give me a direct measurement of what it is. Typically you want to do this with what's right in front of the tire, because that should be the surface that's close to, so I'll zero this back out and put it on the bracket. And as you can see, we have 3.4 degrees of camber on the passenger front of the car. It's pretty aggressive. I mean, this is a race car, but I maybe don't want that much, so we'll check the other side, see where that one's at, and then I can determine whether or not I'm gonna start putting some shims in and change that. Well, that's how you go about checking caster camber, and then once those are set, which I still have to go through, and if I'm gonna make a camber or a caster adjustment, it's going to affect the toe, so toe always gets checked last. But right now I'm not too worried about the caster because they're within a degree of each other, and I don't have all of the tiny little adjustments for that yet. I'll have to see what I need to order to even them out. I'm just looking at trying to get my camber dialed in to where they're even on both sides, and then make sure my toe is even and in a window that's acceptable. But it's really nice with this new Quicktrick 4-wheel kit. I certainly wouldn't be able to do this before. I only had a 2-wheel kit, and then I had to pull out strings and jack stands, basically need a second person or a tape measure, back and forth, and a bunch of screwing around. I've been able to do this by myself, and that's a real big plus for me because I don't have to try to find a second person to help me out. And what I love about it is, I mean, I'm doing this in the garage. I can also pull this thing out and do it at the racetrack. I've done that before with the old kit to help other people out and get their, a toe adjustment set in, or find out what's wrong when you can just walk by and see that something's wrong with the car, and we can throw the Quicktrick on it and check that stuff at the track, which is really awesome. I've used these guys' stuff even before they partnered up with me. It's really nice to have the ability to do a custom alignment for a race car kind of a setup, or even a street car where maybe it's outside of the factory recommended settings, and some shops just won't do that. So it's nice to be able to do it yourself. And if you want to see this car in action and you happen to live out east, I am going to Watkins Glen at the end of this month, April, for GridLife out there. It'll be my first big track event for the year. We'll definitely have to be doing some shakedown testing with this. Hopefully we can get that dialed in fairly quick and run some competitive times at Time Attack. Big changes for this year are, like I was talking about earlier, the 3-link rear suspension, which is going to take some learning. I also have the new engine in, so we're going to be another 100 horsepower and 1,000 RPM on tap. And we'll just see where we end up this year with Time Attack running. The car is partnered up and get help from Hawk Performance, Viking Shocks, Statt did the wraps. It was Statt Wraps out of Grand Rapids. Professional Awesome helps with some of the aero bits that I built, especially with being able to build some custom stuff for me. And of course, there's Quicktrick and R&R Performance out of Spring Lake Park, Minnesota. They're my go-to guys for doing the machining on some of my engine parts. And as you see in the hood, around Schaefer's Oil, buying from Mike Fitzpatrick, which is the Northeast Minnesota distribution area. He's a real good guy to buy from there. So if you're in northeastern Minnesota, you can give him a call and check him out for getting any Schaefer's Oil. And of course, as always, once the snow melts, I'll be able to get over to Black River Motorsports Park and try to get some testing in. Maybe the snow will melt enough before the end of the month. It'd be really nice to get over there and try to dial in this rear suspension. But if not, I mean, they're having a first 5 official events, like as a schedule for this year, which is awesome for a track that's otherwise been abandoned in the past. If you want to check out more about them, you can go to GridLife Filming. It's a channel on YouTube. They're actually, Brian shows all the stuff where from buying the track, it being completely abandoned, to fixing it up and finally having like our first big actual event last fall. So I've been renting the track from him pretty much since he bought it, just to do some testing with this car. And it's pretty awesome to see that there's finally some autocross stuff that's in the Duluth, Superior, Twin Ports, northern Minnesota area, that we don't have to drive hours and hours just to be able to do an autocross. So it's pretty cool. I certainly like to utilize it for testing. And Brian will also be coming with me when we go on a pretty big trip in June, where we're doing GridLife Midwest Fest, and we're going straight to Pittsburgh and starting Autocross week before we hightail it back to Brainerd to run the Map Proving Grounds event. So it should be 12 days trip end to end. 9 of those days we'll be driving the car in some kind of competition. So stay tuned for that, both on his channel and this one, because we're going to try to make sure we got like a week-long content and maybe put together a big video for that.